It's How I Make Money with Andy Beadle. Today, our guest is Amanda Boleyn, and she is the proprietor, owner, Czarina, head coach,
Ooh.
dean, and president of Elevate University, and she did it her way. Seriously, though, so Amanda is a business coach based out of Chicago and works a lot with small businesses who are just getting off the ground, and we are delighted to have her here today. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I love to have people start off and talk a little bit about how they got into doing what they're doing now, how long you've been doing it, and sort of what led you to start this business. We'd love to hear about that.
Oh my gosh. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I think as my own podcast host, it's such an honor to be on the other side of the mic, and it's super fun to have that switch. So thank you for the opportunity. It's always, I like to be in your seat because the person asking the questions is who I believe is in control of the conversation. So anyway, I digress, so thank you for having me. And gosh, it is a bit of a journey. And I always go into the chronological order, and I love sharing it because just as much as with any business, it's never a linear thing. It's very much up and down all over the place. And I think sometimes in online space or even in our own brain, we can look at someone's journey and make assumptions about how easy or flawless or just streamlined it's been, right? When the reality is, for me, I graduated college in 2010. I studied finance, got my entrepreneurship certificate, always knew I wanted to go and work for myself in some capacity and have that freedom and flexibility. I spent 2 years in corporate, which that's a whole thing to unpack in terms of if anyone's tuning in and listening and who's working corporate and wants to start their own business, there's like an entire identity shift that comes with leaving corporate. And I
want to put a pin in that. Right?
Yes.
I want to put a pin.
Let's do it.
I have basically never had a real job. I mean, I got out of school. I went and I got a PhD. That's its own set of problems. I taught for 10 years. Let me tell you, being a university professor is not a real job. And then I started a business. So I'm on my fourth business I've been doing. So yeah, I would love to talk about that shift in everything, right? Mindset, all of that from corporate. Yeah. So we're putting a pin in that. We're coming back. So there we go. Keep going.
Yeah. Pin number one.
All right. There we go.
So yeah, I made that transition by just a series of events that I had found myself in certain positions and situations. In May of 2012, someone that I knew offered me an opportunity to work on a project of theirs with AT&T doing sales training inside call centers. And that was my first taste of the freelance world. I said yes to whatever project I wanted to. I got to work with amazing people. I was traveling the country to all different types of cities, including Virginia. And it was so amazing. And I actually still do some of that work today. So when we get into like how I make my money, how does she do it, her way make her money, I'm happy to unpack all of that, because I think for some people, the one streamlined way of making revenue really suits them. And then there's other people that I identify with that love to have their hand in multiple different pots, because that actually is what keeps them fueled as opposed to just this one thing. And I think it's just really important for people to understand what suits them the best and honor that and show up and do things of that nature. So I cracked work traveling all the time, leadership, sales training, got to work with like JP Morgan. Today I work with Google through another company. Super fun stuff. And then in 2015, launched the She Did It Her Way podcast purely as a hobby. It was one of those things where I'm like, I'm on the road every week. I want something of my own. I love talking. Let's start with podcasting. 2017, at the end of the year, launched our first ever in-person event, the She Did It Her Way Summit, which we've hosted every single year since then. Obviously 2020 was virtual, but it was still, nonetheless, it was a really great event. And then did a bunch of different things in the past 3 years to really come to the conclusion, like today, where we are at now is we have our summit. We've got Podcast Your Way, which is a course where I teach other women and men, online business owners who want to add that element of podcasting into their business for their marketing. And then also Elevate University, which we can talk about. Elevate University is really to help the individual on the mental and emotional journey as they move from corporate to building their business, because as we were talking about, like just with the identity shift, there's so much that comes up from mental chatter in the brain that like, if you don't have the tools to work through it, your business is going to peter out, I guess you could say. It like never will get off the ground. And so that is really where I found this opportunity that, yes, it's important to have strategy and tactical, but it's also important to have the tools to be able to work through the mind blocks and challenges that you may face, especially in the first 2 years. And it's primarily geared towards women. Men can join too, but I think women's journey mentally is a little bit different than that of our male counterparts. But I'm not blanketing and I'm saying that it's like the whole shtick. But my husband's an entrepreneur, so I know that there's a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah, sure. Well, and I think that you know, a lot of people talk about mindset, and maybe that whole idea is getting a little bit overplayed in a way, because it, you know, when people talk about it all the time, it loses its meaning. But I think you have nailed a lot of stuff here, and the emotional journey of an entrepreneur is so interesting, because as you said, there are a million ways to make money. And you decide which pieces you like and what you gravitate towards and the kinds of things that really feed you. And then you find yourself, depending on your personality, that kind of charts these valleys and peaks and all this as you kind of go into the world of being in your own business. So do me a favor. Let's come back to that. Tell me a little bit about what you learned about transitioning out of corporate life into doing it your own way.
Yeah. Okay. That the biggest thing that I've learned about the transitioning of corporate is, and granted, I was only there for 2 years, so I know some of your listeners are decades into a corporate job and contemplating on starting their own business. There's the identity shift. You gain, just like you do if there's any sort of thing that you identify in your life, but as it relates to being in corporate, it's really easy for the ego to get attached to what it is known for in a certain environment. Like even one of my specific clients so desperately was working on her business, was working in corporate, and I saw, and it's no fault, it's just identifying this, but she was known for a particular role within her organization. And so one day it would be really bad, and then the next day there would be accolades involved. And so it would re-engage well, maybe it's not so bad. And that even happened to me too. I worked at Target in the stores right out of college in their executive team leader program. And I was one of 5 ETLs is what they call it, selected out of over 1,200 applicants. And so there was this very much, prestige about being selected that you almost think like, how dare I, if I even think of stepping out? But then there's all the pressure about like, I'm supposed to go get a job with a 401k and all these constructs that are given to us throughout our entire life, that to even think about breaking the mold is scary enough. But I really do feel that once someone considers about potentially going out on their own, that voice is never going to leave. And from that moment, it's what work can I do on my thoughts? What work can I do and figure out what business I want to run? And then what community can I plug myself into to be surrounded by those to help normalize what it is that I'm experiencing and going through, because that's huge.
Yeah, I think a lot of people believe that, believe isn't the right word. I think the corporate job environment has a sensation or a feeling of security. That when you're on your own, you know, we would joke, you know, you eat what you kill, but when you but when you're right, when you own the company, even if you're a solopreneur or you've got team members, like it's all on you. You know, generally you do most of the sales work, even if it's just marketing and driving people to a website. You're responsible for revenue. You've got to make payroll, and that's a tremendous amount of pressure. If you do that, and you also have a family, right? You know, you've got a partner, you live together, maybe you've got kids, you've got things, you know, obligations to prepare for. I think that mindset shift is really hard. And my counter to that has always been, hey man, if you think your corporate job is secure, you got another thing coming. I mean, right? Nobody's safe in that world. But yeah, I agree with you. I like the idea of getting fed by accolades over time. That's real hard to get when you own your own gig, right? You know?
Oh, that is huge. I mean, no one's coming up to you and telling you, you did such an amazing job, or you're on the right track, or thank you so much for getting that report over. And it totally changes. You have to have, I know it sounds, and some people might be listening being like, I don't really care if someone gives me accolades. But there are people, and including myself, that was a really big thing. Like when I became a contractor, I wasn't getting that feedback. There wasn't a feedback loop about, am I doing the right thing? Is this making sense? Sure, sometimes the clients would give that feedback, but even within She Did It Her Way, that's really where, for me, recognizing the building of a business is that you are kind of in a silo unless you connect yourself with a mastermind or other business owners to help bring that awareness. Because if we're not careful, that's where our brain will freak out and start to think that, begin these thoughts that create that mental chatter that just slow us down as opposed to like accelerating forward.
Yeah. Well, how did you balance that stuff if you started the podcast kind of as a side thing, and maybe not to pretend that podcast stuff is easy to do, but maybe that's a little different than running your own, like, oh, I got to go get new clients. Yeah. How did you balance that kind of transition all the way out of paid gigs into running your own shop?
Yeah, well, and that, what I will say, when I first started the podcast in 2015, I ran and did majority, if not all of the things except writing the show notes when it came to podcasting. And it's really great that podcasting is very much a logistical thing. So if you have a templated approach, it's pretty easy to batch things and then to schedule them. So for me in that phase, it was really finding like, how can I hire a virtual assistant that I can train so that I can just show up and do the thing? And right now, the way that I look at, so I was sharing before, when I look at my total streams of revenue and income, it goes from my husband and I, we own a multi-unit property that we live in right now that provides us a stream of income. And we're looking to we're under contract for our second one right now. Then I still do contract work. And then I have She Did It Her Way. She Did It Her Way is when I've built that revenue stream up. Like our revenue streams come from sponsorship. It comes from the She Did It Her Way Summit and the ticket sales. It comes from the Elevate University membership, and then the Podcast Your Way course. And so that's really where that comes from. And now it's looking at the strategic lens of, how do I get more students or leads in the top of the funnel so that I can nurture, so that I can convert them and also invite them into my program to increase sales. And that's really like, if you unpack everything from how the streams of revenue in my life are, those are the three key ones: the contract, the She Did It Her Way, and then also the rental income.
Gotcha. Well, and I think if you're one of the people who, and we're kind of like this internally in our business as well, I think there are a lot of folks who like I would say the challenge, but it's really just because it's a thrill to kind of balance these different things and kind of do and there's a piece of that you tell yourself it's a good idea because you've got, well, if one's a little weak this month, the other one's coming up, but really it's just fun to juggle all the balls. And I think that one thing that is important to back up to, because we don't talk a lot about this on the podcast, but you and I have used a little bit of what to normal people is some jargon. In our world where you are selling to human beings, actual people who have needs, we call it the funnel, right? Where it's like we put leads in the top of the funnel, we nurture them, and they become sales, which sounds cold and kind of dickish, to be honest with you, but it's also it's I'm just saying, and yet what it really is, it's about, how do I find the people that I can help, because there's nothing worse than having clients who are unhappy, right? How do I find the people I can help, and then how do I give them enough value in what is an extremely busy world, extremely busy day, while they make that decision, to help them understand whether or not this is a relationship worth pursuing. And I don't care if that's for a $29 ebook where you have to automate a lot of that, or if you're selling somebody into a course, that nurturing process is hugely important. And I would guess that from your experience working with sales teams, and especially call center teams, right, that's got to have been really huge for you to translate that experience into growing your own business.
Yeah, I will definitely. And that's part of, people ask me, why do I still do contract and why do I keep it? And actually someone asked me the other day, they're like, well, if you had to choose, which one would it be? And I'm like, I kind of feel that that's a question of who's your favorite child, because each of them have their own sort of benefit, self-serving benefit, in the sense that like while I do contract work, not only am I working collaboratively with other brilliant minds and developing content and facilitating it, there's a lot of transferable skills from this area of my life that then I bring into with Elevate University, which is focused on coaching women and individuals on mindset and personal development, while also hosting co-working hours so that they can assess their goals and they can review the goals and they can create content. So there's a lot of transferable skills, and to me, I think it's still a benefit to my life. And until that changes, I don't see something like I don't plan on like changing anything about it, but who knows, maybe it gets to a place where then I decide my life, there's kids involved, so the circumstance might change. But as far as right now, like things that I learn and that I've taught with sales training for large corporations are 100% valuable and transferable to the market and the people that I help today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then, you hear an actress or actor decides to retire, like Daniel Craig says, okay, I'm going to be done doing Bond because I'm just, getting to the point I want to do it anymore and I'm getting a little old. And then people are like, well, how would $55 million sound to do another one? Well, of course. So, I mean, if Google calls you up and says, I'll give you $30,000 to come train my people for a month, you're like, heck yeah, I'll go do that, So especially if it's in your wheelhouse. So I think that makes total sense. Well, tell me a little bit right now. You had mentioned, you had to do your event virtually. What last year, our audience probably is aware of the COVID crisis. Maybe they're not. You never know who's under a rock these days. But obviously,
someone
it's
might be listening to
business.
this in like 20 years and be like, "What's COVID?"
Yeah, what the heck was that? Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. And man, I love the thought of somebody listening to this to 20 years. That'd be cool. But yeah, so tell me, what are you excited about in your business now? It's been a tough year, but it's been an interesting year for a lot of us. Anybody who's still standing deserves a pat on the back. What do you got going that's got you jazzed?
Yeah, COVID overall, and I know that it was a challenging year for a lot of people in 2020, and it's still a challenging year starting in 2021. So I definitely don't want to dismiss any of that by any means. I found that because I was already working from home and doing a virtual life running She Did It Her Way, that for me, that transition wasn't necessarily there because it already was in place. And so I felt really grateful and fortunate that for my personal world, there wasn't a lot of change. I do like for our summit that we usually do in person, it went virtual. And so that there are a lot of actually benefits to going in virtual. I still will always go in person when I can because there is something so valuable about the energy that you get from being in a room with other humans that you can't necessarily replicate via video conference. But because it was virtual, it actually opened us up to people across the world. And that was really cool to see people from Europe, from Sweden, from England, from other countries to be tuning in and joining the event. Now, from a business perspective, revenue wise, because we didn't have the overhead of a physical place and flying speakers in, we obviously our profit margin was much higher. So like from that business standpoint, that was definitely much easier. As far as the contract work, I wasn't doing a lot of it before 2020 last year because it was requiring me to get on a plane. And because I was getting on a plane, it took up more of my time, where in 2020, they shifted from in-person to online. So to be able to carve out 90 minutes twice a week to do a sales training was much more flexible and gave me the ability to say yes. Whereas if it was, hey, but you need to get on a plane and travel, I don't know if it would have been an immediate, like, yes, I'll do that, because that's time and energy that eats up that then I can't devote towards She Did It Her Way. But if I'm doing it virtual and it's like, I need to plug in and it's 90 minutes, so much easier. So yeah, I feel really grateful. 2020 was overall a decent year personally, and for business wise, it was also really great as well.
Well, what do you got going this year? We're taping this in January of 21. What's coming up for you guys this year?
This year, it's really refining things that kind of like ended up last year. So as I was telling you, with She Did It Her Way, Since I launched it in 2015 as a podcast, and then we had the summit in 2017, a lot, 2018, 2019, and even the beginning part of 2020 was really kind of throwing spaghetti up against the wall, seeing what sticks, what doesn't, doing tactical things, coaching personal development. And that's really where I found that, which now is Elevate University, is you can have all the tactics and the know-hows of what you need to do. And business is pretty simple, but just because something's simple doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy. And so for us in 2021, it's really scaling Elevate University, optimizing the funnels, which going back to your earlier comment, I know like the funnels, the top of the funnel, what's your email
and it's shorthand we use, right? You know, it's not.
And it's marketing. So, I mean, it is what it is, right? But really staying focused. So instead of making multiple offers, streamlining it to the 3 core offers, and then really working, optimizing, increasing, like, are we communicating? Does our sales page reflect actually what is part of the program? So doing market research calls with students who are in the program, sharing success stories, optimizing the testimonials, going into paid advertising. We're going to be doing that in March for an upcoming podcast course. So really just streamlining and looking at how we can optimize what we have and staying focused to what is already there versus going out and getting shiny ball syndrome of thinking of what's the next thing that we can offer and learning to say no and protect the boundaries.
Well, let's talk. What do you, when you talk about Elevate University, obviously I've looked at this stuff prior to the show, so I would have some knowledge, but tell people what you guys do there, and really who are you helping and how do you help them with that service?
Yeah. So Elevate University it's a year-long membership, and it is designed for women and men if they would like to join. But it's really designed to help business owners who are in the first 2 years of building their business and helping them on the mental and emotional journey, along with creating the right habits and routines. And so every month there is a new course that drops. So for example, January was Unstoppable Goals. So there's an entire course on Unstoppable Goals workbooks that the students can go through, and they can then, it's also supplemented with a 1-hour weekly coaching call that they can join at any time. The other part of it as well is that monthly we have 3 standing co-working coaching calls. So once a month, there's an hour long, which we just had it because we're filming this in February. So this past Monday, it was an hour long goal review call. So where students could come in and they could ask questions. It was really designed to say, here's the time to set aside every month, review your goals. Let's track them. Let's measure them. Let's identify what worked, what didn't. What do you need to change moving forward? The second standing monthly call that we have as well is a calendar planning call. So looking at all the things that you need to get done for the month, and let's go and block them on your calendar and batch them. So, every 30-minute increment, what do you need to produce, not just do? Because I think that's the other part where people confuse busy with actually being productive.
True.
And so getting them in that mindset of like, checking your email, while that may feel productive, isn't really productive. But going out and having market research calls with potential clients is something that helps move your business along. Putting out an offer, writing your like all those things are more, what are you producing to move forward as opposed to just being busy. And then the third one is once a month, it's content planning co-working call, where one of the things that newer entrepreneurs I find that struggle is they don't have the time to plan their content. So in Elevate University, we've created space that they can plug themselves into, work alongside virtually of other members to be able to make sure that they're completing that work. So it's a lot of, it's coaching, it's routines. And then we have a monthly course. So in February, it's scalable from the start, walking them through how to organize email, Gmail particularly, how to organize their calendar, how to set up Asana, how do they have everything organized so that it's not just decentralized, it's more centralized so that they can move faster. I always relate it to if you're in a dark room and the lights are off and you're trying to navigate through that room, but it's dark, you move slower because you don't want to stub your toe. You don't want to run into things. And that's how, if your business is decentralized, you move slower. Whereas if you can organize it and things, you know exactly where they're at, it's like walking into a room with a light switch on.
Right. Well, and I love that analogy. And I think there's a lot there. It's funny when you think about starting a business and you hear somebody say, "Oh, so we do a thing on goals and we do a thing on calendars," and you go, "Geez, goals, God."
Yeah.
It's like, no, and I mean, we walk into a new client, they're $100 million, $120 million business, and you've got the founder. They've just been acquired essentially by a capital firm. And now it's time to kind of scale, and these guys want their money back. And you look around and you go, how the fuck did you guys get to $100 million given what a disorganized mess all this is? And that's okay. But I think it's important. It's important when people start a business. I think it's easy to believe that what is going to make you successful is, I'm going to start a pizza shop because I make really great pizza. Or, my whole family, we love to cook. And I can't tell you the number of people who've been like, oh, you should open a restaurant. I was like, I've worked in restaurants. My kids all worked in restaurants. I'm not going to do that. Not because I don't think we could be successful or we couldn't make good food, but all of the pieces that go into that are required to be successful. That's a shit house of hard work. And I've already built a business. And it is that stuff. It's scheduling. It's, what are my goals? Am I staying on track with them? Because you get sucked into email and dealing with this little fire over here and something looks shiny over there or whatever. I think that's huge.
Start to major in minor things.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to put it. And the Elevate University idea, to me at least, and not to shill hard on the podcast, but if I recall, the price is pretty low. And relatively speaking, it's not very high. Yeah. And to me, it's more, hey, what am I doing to make sure that I give myself a fighting chance? So what are all the things I need to do? And it sounds in a business like, oh, I got to have good finances. It's like, no, you need to get sleep. You need to drink enough water. You need to eat well. You need to keep getting exercise. You need peers, you need leader, you need all these things, but you go, nah. And it makes such a huge difference to have that as a foundation. So that's a really good thing, I think, that you guys are doing to make that available. While we were talking, it brought up to me, have you been on Clubhouse at all?
I've been on Clubhouse a few times. I guess I wouldn't say that I am active on Clubhouse. What about you?
Right. I've just really started getting into it, but we see all the platforms come and go, and everybody's excited about them, and you go, yeah, we'll watch it and see if it's any value to us. So I'm still in that phase. But
you were talking Periscope.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody was into Periscope for a while, but
still
Clubhouse,
around? I
have no idea. That's a really good question. To be honest with you, I get surprised that Snapchat is still a thing, but that's me. I'm 53, so. So Clubhouse, one thing I wanted to say about, you were talking about, it's mostly women, but men are welcome. One thing I have really dug about Clubhouse is my wife is an early bed, early to rise. I tend to stay up later. So I've stayed up late and just gotten on Clubhouse and gone through rooms. And it's been really cool because there are so many rooms and groups that are female entrepreneurs. There's a huge African-American community on Clubhouse. And it's been, to me, it's been a really great experience to be able to just sit and listen to people talk and hear the problems they face, hear the things that are interesting for them. And you said this earlier on in the show that, women coming to an entrepreneurial endeavor maybe have a slightly different set of challenges and mindsets than men do. I'd love to hear you unpack that a little bit and talk a little bit about what you mean when you say that.
Yeah, for one example is I just did an interview a couple of days ago about women and money and how we tend to think about it and go about it as opposed to maybe some of our male counterparts. And again, this isn't a blanket statement for all of it. What I find is that because of the feminine energy, and again, you don't have to be a female or a male or identify as that to have that feminine energy. Like we all have that. But it's more of listening to our intuition and feeling based as opposed to potentially just going after what the numbers say and following that and going through and using the masculine energy to execute it. Whereas feminine energy and with women, we might more be intuitively led as opposed to going and pushing through, even if it doesn't necessarily feel right. And knowing that sometimes it's having that vision, but also being flexible in how you get there and aligning with what feels right, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to what you think you should do in that moment. Um, I think we can sometimes get caught up in thought loops that don't necessarily serve us, and thinking
Right.
about, like, I know my male friends, when I first went out on my own and they were doing it as well, it was like no question, they just made the decision, they did it. Where then what I've experienced and what I've coached on and worked with women, there's a little bit more of a hesitation and a risk
Mm-hmm.
adverse, not reverse.
Risk averse.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
whereas yeah, and that is something that, making sure that we have the tools to work through that so that we can get our brain in the position to allow us to take action. And one of my favorite quotes is by Wayne Dyer, that when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. And so redefining that meaning of what we make failure mean, or if you do a launch and you've got a new offer and you go out and you pitch it and it's crickets, it doesn't
Right.
necessarily mean that you're a failure. It just means what you did didn't work. So how do we change, how do we alter the way that we do it again, whereas not putting the onus of I'm a failure because
Mm-hmm.
it didn't work. And that was part of,
Right.
like, I struggled years ago with that as well, and I think I see it happen, so I want to help more women kind of break free and move through that and know that, like, you're intrinsically valuable as a human being. Like, there's no question about that. And
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't, you got to go for the no, because the more no's you get, statistically, you're
Right.
going to get that yes. And not
Right.
making it mean that when someone says no, they're saying no to you. It's just that they're saying no to the offer. And so really
Right.
learning to detach yourself from that response that you might get. And I mean, that's just one example of it, but um yeah, it's really important work in order to get
Right.
ourselves in a position to take action, because if we're not taking action or producing the results that we want, it all comes back to what it is that we're thinking. And in Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, it's our thoughts create our feelings that create an action that produce a result. So if you think that, okay, I want to start a business, but what if I fail? Well, asking
Right.
the question of what if I fail creates doubt and uncertainty. So you're going to be constrictive and you're probably not going to take action. And so therefore your result is going to be exactly the way it is. But how can we change that thought to be more serving and to be more inspiring, to where
Right.
it supports you in taking the action that you need to take to get the results that you want?
Well, and I like that you bring up Napoleon Hill too, because the idea of this kind of loop or chain of thought and emotion and action and so on and so forth. And that's great, because I think a lot of us start a project and we don't really bring most of these thoughts to consciousness. And the thought,
Mhm.
what if I fail, is so fascinating to me. So my background's kind of in
Mm.
behavioral psych. That was part of my teaching gig. I used to teach cognitive science.
Yeah.
And the but one of the great things about that is that in Hill's approach and a lot of the good ones about specificity and really understanding what you're thinking. So as you noted, you get in these
Mm.
chains of rumination, right, where I just keep turning on these thoughts, totally unproductive, but we all do it.
Mhm.
And then you've got this idea, what if I fail? Like, that sentence is basically fucking meaningless, and yet it feels really powerful.
Mhm.
Because if you say,
Oh yeah.
what if I fail? Well, tell me what you mean by that. Well, like,
Yep.
what if my business doesn't work? Okay, well, which piece do you mean? Well, what if I can't find enough customers?
Mhm.
Okay, great. Now we have an actual problem. And maybe you can't find enough customers, but
Mhm.
that's a big distance between what if I fail and all of the psychic existential dread that comes with that versus, what if I don't sell enough cookies at the grocery store for the Girl Scout table today? It's like, those are real different questions. And helping
Yeah.
people understand that when you start in business, you've got a series of answerable questions. And yeah, you're going to mess some stuff up and you're going to fail some of them. But you cannot fail short of, I don't know, getting hit by a bus. And there's really not a lot you can do with that other than not cross the street without looking, right? So
Yeah.
I love that idea of digging into people's thoughts, and leads me to another
Well, and
thing
it's
that we
also
see.
too,
Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead, please. Yeah.
I was gonna say the thoughts and the questions and the words that we use, and just bringing that awareness to
Mm-hmm.
them. It was a couple of weeks ago on one of the coaching calls. It was the one of the students was speaking, and I noticed that the questions that she was posing were centered on answers that didn't really support and weren't beneficial. Like,
Right.
why is this not working? Why does this keep failing? Like, those answers aren't really productive in helping you. Like, sure, okay, fine, figuring out like why it's not working might be helpful, but in that moment you might want to ask like, what can I do differently that's
Mm-hmm.
going to better me in this situation? How can I, like, something that's more proactive and being aware of those questions? And even like a couple of weeks ago, one of the realtors that I was working with was making a comment. I asked this realtor, I'm like, oh, what are you doing? And he said he was trying to find his like next wife, and then made a comment, but it probably won't happen. And I joked and I said, yeah, not with that attitude. Like, what we need to understand is that like when we say I don't have enough time or I'm stressed, our subconscious hears that and then perpetuates that and creates that as our reality. And that's why our word is our wand. And it's so important to be really intentional, not just about the thoughts that we think, but the words that we say, because that creates our reality. And it just all goes back to like, especially I mean, everybody, I think this is work that we can all do, but I just focus on females in the beginning stages of entrepreneurship and helping them accelerate that process. But it's so important just to be, number one, aware of what our thoughts are.
Right.
And just because we think it doesn't mean that it's true.
And
we think our thoughts are facts.
Right. That was, I was going to say, I think we believe that our emotions and our thoughts are actually about something. And most of the time they're not. But we're here and I feel crappy and I look around and I go, oh, it must be because that's not cleaned up or because the dog peed in the deck or whatever, you know. And I think that what people hear when we say things like, oh, you know, be intentional about your thoughts, or, oh, think about how you talk to yourself, that sounds very kind of woo-woo spiritual to them. And it's not. I mean, it's literally like training a dog.
It's science.
Yeah, there is not a whole lot going on up here that's very complicated other than the noise, you know.
Right.
And it's weird stuff too. And you see these exercises where you know, hey, stand in front of the mirror every morning and say I love you, and people are like, are you out of your goddamn mind? And yet you say, well, look, the cost to you is 1 second. Can you do that every day for 30 days, regardless of how stupid you feel? The change that it makes in people's emotional and mental lives is stunning. And there's no greater spiritual thing other than that you're training the dog to salivate when you get the treats out. You know, I mean, it's really not that hard. So I think it's really fascinating yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the dog and the salivating is even, and to your point, I have friends that when I share, you know, things that I'm reading or like kind of just nuggets and whatnot, they think it's very much woo-woo and crazy.
Right.
And and it's not, it's very much science-based. And even the thought of with the dog and the salivating, you can think a thought and have a physical experience. If you think about describing to someone to imagine a lemon and you take a bite of that lemon and you describe it in detail, they will start to feel physically that reaction of what it's actually like to bite into a lemon, but you aren't physically biting into a lemon. Joe Dispenza, have you read any of his books?
I know of him, but I've never read anything by him.
Such incredible, the breaking the habit of being yourself and then becoming superhuman or supernatural. And so well done in the sense of breaking down the science as to what actually is happening internally when it comes to meditation and in the beta and the theta waves, like all of that. And it's like, I was telling my husband, I'm like, anytime someone was thinking about like meditation's kind of woo-woo, I'm like, it's not woo-woo, it's science. Like just read what happens internally and how like disease is dis-ease within the body. And if you're constantly suspended in a stressed out state, that breaks down in your body and can cause that dis-ease. And it's fascinating. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm just sharing things that I've read, but it's just so powerful.
Well, and I think people hear that and then they go, oh, if I have the right mindset, my business is going to be successful. Oh, if I meditate, I won't get sick. It's like, no, that's not, I mean, I don't think anybody normal thinks that that's true, but I or mentally healthy, maybe that's a better way to put it. But on the other hand, you come back to that idea of giving yourself a fighting chance. And you mentioned Wayne Dyer, who I love. One of my favorite lines from him that I probably first heard 30 years ago and still think of it all the time is always beware the temptation to see yourself as unfairly treated. And I think it's very easy to have the twin of, you know, talking poor self-talk, if you will, to then be met with, well, the reason this didn't work is because things weren't fair or the world isn't right or whatever. And now you've got these two things, basically at war with each other and really preventing you from progressing in your business and making money, which we're all about, but also progressing as a human being and being more confident and offering value to your community and to the world and knowing that you've got value to offer and feeling good about that, right? I think that's a really important thing. And none of that to me is terribly spiritual. It's more practical, right? It doesn't serve you to be down on yourself all the time. There's just, it does, I guess, in some way, but it doesn't help you get anywhere, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think the biggest thing too is knowing that if you're in a relationship, for a relationship to change, it only takes one person working on themselves. And that was something that I had to really learn, even with my relationship with one of my parents, is that we as humans can't really control other people or other things. Right. And so it really serves us to focus on ourselves. And I think it's Byron Katie talks about how there's God's business and then there's like your business. And it's so important that, and especially with entrepreneurship in the beginning, and sometimes I even catch myself, if I'm not careful, is making sure that you're staying in your business and not getting into other people's business. That's really huge, because even simply seeing a competitor or someone else doing something, it can trigger thoughts to think like, oh, I'm not doing enough. Like they're so far ahead. Like, who am I to offer this? And then you just spiral out into that thought loop, and it just, it does not serve anyone, especially you.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And I think that mindset stuff is so important, and then it does get used a lot. And so then people discount it, which is really not to their benefit and really kind of too bad in a lot of ways. So tell me a little bit about what you guys do to get more awareness for the community. I mean, essentially, what are you doing to get new customers? How do you guys go ahead and bring people into Elevate, and how do you bring people into your coaching and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And one of the things is visibility. So going on other podcasts, which is such a huge marketing driver, making sure that we're producing top quality content that's shareable, that people engage with as well. Using lead gen, so creating and using free trainings that we've created that then ultimately come back into Elevate University. So for example, in January, we did a stressed out to streamline training that people can join at any time. And then that feeds into Elevate University. So making sure that we're always out there offering it. We're integrating more marketing opportunities like in Instagram. So we weren't really leveraging Instagram, or at least I don't think we were leveraging Instagram to, like, we weren't optimizing it in a way. If you go to the Instagram, it's a bunch of quotes, which is really great. It gets the brand out there, but it's not really educating it up until now in February, when we've worked on how we're planning the content, making sure that we're looping in student success stories and quotes from Elevate University, from Podcast Your Way, to also like actually directly market the product. In March, we're doing some live trainings, which we're going to test out Facebook ads to drive traffic to the opt-in for Podcast Masterclass. We're just I'm trying a bunch of things and then following and tracking to at least see like what's working, what do we need to do more of, and what do we need to do less of, and making sure that the money that, especially for paid ads that we're investing, actually have an ROI. I tried paid ads years ago, and this is a story about, I think it was in 2018, we, for the summit, and I had never done paid ads up at that point, but in my mind, I thought that the Facebook ads would be the silver bullet to selling out our She Did It Her Way Summit. And I think I spent $7,500 between ad spend and then management fee. And all the people that came to the event, which there were 60 people from across the country and Canada, all came through the podcast, not from the ads at all. And I think that one of the things looking back for that experience was, one, I wanted the ads to do the work for me in selling out this event. And that was the wrong, I don't like to say like wrong or right, but that thought didn't necessarily serve me, because I don't believe now, looking back, knowing what I know, that I wasn't necessarily going into the ads with the right strategy and the mindset of what did I want to do here and what did I want the conversion and the ultimate goal to be. So that's just a thing that I wanted to share.
Well, and we do a lot of ad management, obviously, and it is if a client in your situation came to us and was like, well, I want to run ads for my conference. Well, when's your conference? Well, it's in like 4 months. Our answer would be, well, I will gladly take your money. However, you're not going to get any signups from this, but it's hard. It's a very difficult. I mean, it's a discipline, right? I mean, it is a discipline to learn how to do in managing ad campaigns, and we find this, and it's very vertical dependent too. Actually, for your kind of content, and sorry, now I'm on a consulting call, but why not?
No, I love it.
For your type of content, Facebook is actually a fantastic platform for paid ads. Yeah. And what you want is a regular monthly budget that you're going to use to basically bring people through to a PDF of some kind that's very sharp and focused. The 5 things you need to do to whatever. Our average cost per lead for the one that we have for our consumer space is under 70 cents. So, but
that's amazing.
But those people come in, and you're really trying to get them to be part of the community so that you can offer them service. So we give a lot of content. And a couple of weeks ago, I emailed the whole list. I said, okay, email me personally, ask me any one question you want about your business. And a guy emailed me because he was trying to start a T-shirt business that wasn't going off the ground, and we'd know a little bit about that space. And I did a little dig, and I wrote him back, I don't know, probably a 700-word reply. I like to write. And he came back. He says, "I thought for sure you were just going to copy and paste something. I can't believe it." But people seem so but they seem so surprised that you genuinely want to help them. It's like, no, I mean, I do what I do because I enjoy it. The ad game, and you talked about this earlier, the importance of taking time out to create content as a business owner. And I'll just say what I think you meant by that, because it's certainly what we would mean by that. When you own a business and you don't have somebody as a client or a prospect whose name who's in your orbit, you need to get the word out there. And you do that nowadays by providing them value. And that value generally has to be you're either being entertaining, informative, or supremely educational, right? So you're doing one of those 3 things. You're taking part of their day, so you got to offer them something in return, and what you offer is content, right? And as business owners, I think we don't take the time to learn about how best to market what we do. And you are so right. People do not take the time to do content. When you talk to people about that, what is your advice for new business owners in terms of putting together a regular content schedule for their business?
Yeah. And you had said something too, my gosh, that I was in my head. I'm like, yes. And hopefully it'll come back to me because it's, it'll come back. But for new business owners, I think the part that most people get overwhelmed by is that they feel like they have to be everywhere, and the creating the content process is very overwhelming. And I find that it's like pole vaulting over mouse turds, where they build it up to be this big thing in their mind, when in reality, it's like, it's really when you have a process, which again, part of Elevate University is helping business owners to identify template opportunities, to identify processes. And one of the things that I was taught early on when I was doing contract work is that my mentor at the time said that a proven process leads to predictable results. So everywhere in my life, I'm always looking for what's the process, because when you have a process, you can scale it, you can work more, like you can optimize and work more efficiently. So with content, I like to break it down into pieces of identifying kind of what you were saying with the educational, the call to action, and really looking at like, what are content buckets and what are things that you can talk about? Where's your anchor piece of content? So for us, it's the podcast. Our podcast works in monthly themes that correlates with the theme that's being taught inside of Elevate University. That helps us streamline our content. Then every week when there's a podcast, we use that content to repurpose for our email. And then we also repurpose it for Instagram. With Instagram, we also bring in additional content ideas and work in reels and things like that are coming up in February. So it's a little bit of like a massaging of it. But for the most part, let's look at Instagram, for example. is how often do you want to post per day?
Right.
Or how often do you want to post per week? Identify how many, like, okay, I need to do, let's say 15. I need to come up with 15 posts. Of those 15 posts, do you want them to be stagnant? Do you want them to be reels? Do you want them to be educational content? Like, what's the format? What's the content? And then once we have like, okay, I need to do 3 of this, 4 of this, 3 of this, then you have structure. Then it's much easier what you're saying before with the specificity of the brain. Our brain loves specificity. That's why people, and I did this too when I was working from like building She Did It Her Way while working not corporate contract work, like early on, is that after a full day on my feet, it was really easy to say I was going to work on my business, but then sit down and turn on the TV, open up the laptop and be like, what the F am I even doing? Like, what am I working on? Right. So then you close the laptop and you procrastinate. It's because we're not being specific enough. We're not aware of like, what do I need to produce? Because again, checking email is just busy work. I'd rather see an email inbox go like uncheck for a week if that means that you're going to be able to take massive action in your business. I don't recommend going MIA I mean, you get what I'm saying. Like, there's a cost versus benefit there that you have to always be asking yourself and making sure that you're doing things that move it forward and identifying like, why are you not taking, like, again, the brain loves specificity. I feel like I could talk about this stuff all day long.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, I am going to need to know where to send the royalty checks because I just wrote down and plan to heavily use the phrase pole vaulting over mouse turds. I have not heard that before. I want to thank you for that. That's awesome because it's absolutely the truth, right? And that is something we all fall victim to and don't even know we're doing it. What a great way to put that. Wow. That's brilliant, 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 brilliant.
I mean, to be honest, I have to give you the address of my mentor years ago who gave that to me. So I'll send you his address and send the royalty checks. But at what point does someone get to own? Yeah.
I don't know. I guess maybe it's sort of like, I guess I'm part of your downline and you're part of his now, right? So it should trickle up somehow like that, something along those. I don't know, however that works.
Yeah.
But I love that. I love those. It's one of the things I love about doing the podcast is you hear all these great ways to put things and you go, oh, wow, that's really smart. And you said something else and I knew exactly what you meant. And it's so important. When you start in business or you start a new project, the idea of template opportunities. And the way I put it is, hey, if I got to do a thing twice, I'm not going to do it a third time. I will build a robot, right? But template opportunities, I like that. Unpack that idea a little bit if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, template opportunities. So exactly what you said, that if you're doing a task repeatedly in your business, there's probably an opportunity for a template, whether it is template or automation in the business. And that's looking like clients onboarding, people reaching out, your response. Can you make an email template inside of Gmail as a response using email marketing automation? So ConvertKit, HubSpot, things like that. And I think oftentimes too, the limiting belief is that in the beginning stages of building a business that, okay, I'm not ready to create a template or I'm not ready for that next step. And the truth is that even if you don't outsource it to someone in the beginning, it's still going to save you a lot of time and energy to not have to think about what's the next step in the process. So one of the things that I always recommend students and that I love and use is Asana to help centralize the business. And it's great because you can create a task in Asana that is basically a template, and then you can duplicate that. And so when we started doing that for our podcast production years ago, even when it was just me, it was still so amazing to be like, to pull that up and say, okay, this is what I got to go. Boom, 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 rather it living and taking headspace up in my mind. And the other thing that I was saying earlier that I couldn't remember, but I did, now I remembered, is that you asked like how we're marketing the business. The other thing that we are leaning into is also affiliates. So doing affiliate webinars and borrowing and tapping into other audiences that are beneficial. So the podcast, for example, identifying people in my network that want to be part of an affiliate and showing up and doing webinars, joint webinars with their audience as well. And so that's another part of the marketing strategy that we're using in 2021 to help grow the business too.
Well, and I think that, affiliate marketing in our little world got a bad name. And for those who are not familiar with it out there, what that basically means is, for example, we have a community at Brand Distillers. Amanda has a community at She Did It Her Way, Elevate University. And we would do something together as an event to one of those audiences to help build the other audience, right? And then we would share some revenue. So the thing about that, when you get to the share revenue, people think, oh, that must be a trick. It's like, well, no.
Yeah.
When you've got these communities that are adjacent to each other and there's value to be had, like I'm not going to introduce somebody to my friends who I don't think is interesting and would be a good friend, right? I mean, I'm not like that. Just doesn't make any sense. So there's a way in which these partnership opportunities, I think, are a really strong method of growing your audience and doing market research and finding more people to serve and learning and so on and so forth. It's been a really powerful thing for our business, and I'm sure for yours. And the learning thing to me is super important. So I just remarried 4 years ago. My wife is a financial advisor, and she was in commercial banking for years and years and years before that. And I have learned more about women in business and how that world plays out for many women. And again, that's a generalization. Everybody, obviously, we're around everybody has their own path, but I have learned so much about that. And like I said, like being on Clubhouse and listening to conversations, for me, those joint venture opportunities are a chance to hear how somebody like you does something that is, very important and helps businesses, could be helpful to our audience, how our audience responds to that, right? You're learning all the time. And I think that's so important. And it's something you really get out of good affiliate work together, right? Because two people work together and then it kind of expands their ability to serve. So that's really huge and good for you guys. Hey, I want to respect your time. We're coming up on an hour. We have two questions that we're really passionate about.
Oh my gosh, that went by so fast.
This has all been the build up to just this. So no pressure, except the pressure is extreme. Pressure. So very important now. If you need to take a minute, take a deep breath. Here we go. Question number 1 is, if somebody came to you and they were starting their own business, and regardless of what it was, and they said to you, okay, hey, you've been on your own, you've been doing this for a while, what one piece of advice would you give me as I start out? What would that piece of advice be?
Oh gosh. Yeah. The full pressure is on. The one piece of advice that I would give when you're starting out.
Yep.
This is what I would say, is that when you know what it is that you want to do, or even think that you know what you want to do, pick it, lean into it, and find someone who's already doing it that is successful that you can learn from. That was something so for example, if you are thinking of wanting to earn extra revenue, maybe start your own business, you want to get into the virtual space, but you're not exactly sure what you want to do, I would recommend look into virtual assistant work.
Right.
Find a community, find a teacher, invest in learning from them, and take that. That is the quickest path. That is something that I struggled with for years, because I kept saying, like, I'm a pretty resourcul person, but my ego got in the way and saying, I can figure this out. I can hack it. I can reverse engineer it. And that can get you some place. But if you know what it is that you want to do, or simply just pick something, find the person that you can learn from who's already done it and who's been successful, so that you learn all the things and the mistakes that they made, so you don't have to make them, because that's going to save you time, energy, and money in the long term.
And you can then go make new mistakes.
Yeah. But you're already you're already so far ahead.
You fast track through the other ones.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
invest in yourself.
And I love that idea of finding, you find somebody that you can learn from. And there are a lot of ways to do that, through direct mentoring, through coaching, through just observing.
Podcasting, listening to podcasts, Clubhouse. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. We have a whole course on helping people take a side gig and turn it into a real business. So back in 1997, I started this business as a side gig. I went to Barnes & Noble and bought a book like this thick on how to code HTML because I'd always been into computers, and I read it. I don't even remember why, and read it, and then started my first company, and this is company number 4. So, and a bunch of us here have done the same thing, and I have a real special place in my heart for people who are doing a side gig and translating that into a business, and the mechanics of that are super interesting regardless of what you're going to do. So, I think finding people who have done what you've done, or doing what you want to do, and learning from them, and you would be shocked. I have never met a successful entrepreneur who was not willing to talk about what they do. I mean, not one time. I don't think I've never met somebody. I was at an event at a yacht club in Michigan probably 7 years ago, met a guy who owned 4 McDonald's. I'd never met a guy who owned McDonald's before. Talked to him for 4 hours.
Oh my gosh.
About what's it like to own. He's like, oh my God, somebody cares about owning McDonald's. Yeah. So I love that. I love that advice. So when you're starting out, find people who've been successful in your field, go learn from them. If you got to pay to do it, pay to do it. It's worth the tuition. And finally, now this is for all the marbles. 20 years from now, this is why people are going to come back and listen to this episode. Amanda, if you could have one meal with any living public figure, who would it be, and what would you eat?
I would have a meal with Amy Porterfield because she is like an OG and such an inspiration. I think one of the things that I really admire about her is that she's always consistent, steadfast, never seems to be in a rush to put out the next thing, is very intentional about what it is that she does, and is just constantly over delivering. Right. So she would be who I would have my meal with. And where or what we would eat, my instinct and my default is like Life Kitchen, because I love clean food. I love healthy food. But I'm also not like a major foodie. As long as it's healthy and clean, I'm very happy about that.
Amy Porterfield, Life Kitchen. So, and for people who don't know, tell us a little bit, who is Amy Porterfield and what does she do?
Amy Porterfield is kind of, I look at her as the OG when it comes to online marketing. She started out working at the Tony Robbins institution, and then went into Facebook ads. And then today she really primarily focuses on, it seems like, so she did email list building. I'm not sure if that's totally a thing, but she focuses on digital courses and helping people really identify a course that they can create. She's just been around the block with like online marketing. And I feel like you hear a lot of men in the online marketing space, whether it's like Ramit Sethi, Russell Brunson, and all the guys. And I just feel that Amy is such an inspiration as a female in this in this world of top line funnels and conversions and nurture sequences, that it's just, she's like an all around standout business person that I admire.
Well, and not to, I mean, I've gotten a lot out of Russell Brunson's content and Ramit and all those guys. But I will say one of the things I really respect, having had this job for a while, about Amy's work is, ever since she left the Tony Robbins group, to me, she is first and foremost an educator. And that is what she cares about, which I really love about her manner, and everything about it. And I find her entire way of presenting her ideas to be extremely genuine and very helpful. So I love that choice. Clean eating, we have done that here in the South a couple of times. I will have to ask some friends. I've never experienced it myself personally, but no, I totally get what you mean. But well, I love it. Yeah. That's a great answer. We have gotten. You're down every once in a while. You're down for some fried chicken and some barbecue. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that every once in a while. But I just know that I feel much better if it's cleaner.
No, I hear you. That's great. Yeah. Well, we have gotten some tremendous answers to that question. I love hearing people talk about, because that really zeroes in on, hey, you've got an opportunity. Who do you want to talk to and why? And, what do you want to enjoy with them? So thank you. That was another great answer to that question in the long history of asking it. Again, Amanda Boleyn, she did it herway.com. You've got a link to the university right at the top of the site. She did it herway.com. And you've got some free stuff that people can interact with. What do you guys have on offer right now?
Yeah, so you can go to the website at any time under if the Elevate University is not on the top of the tab, you can just always go to work with me and then you can click right there. And then we have a free trainings area where you can get a free training on how to launch a podcast. You can do like our training vault, stress out to streamline. So it's all there on the page. You can just go to the shedititherway.com and do free trainings. And then there's also a section of start a business. So I've just listed out all the favorite software tools and resources that I use from like legal, where do I incorporate a business if I need to, if you want to do it online, Asana, and all the other things that we use with She Did It Her Way. Yeah.
That's very cool. I love it.
Yeah.
And with that, we will hang out for a little bit, but we will stop this episode. Thank everybody for listening. We do have an international audience, believe it or not. And that is one of the things I love the most about doing this podcast is the ability to reach people in other countries. So if you or somebody you know has a small business you'd like to be featured, go ahead and just hit me up. You can reach me at andy@branddistillers.com. And thank you for listening. Thanks for joining us. You can find contact information about our guest in the show notes for this episode. This has been the How I Make Money podcast by Brand Distillers. To learn more, visit branddistillers.com.